From zero to IPO, how Dubai became a global tech powerhouse. Talabat's CTO on 10 years of scaling, surviving chaos, and what's coming next for the builders in MENA. Sven, current CTO of Talabat, welcome to Breaking Down Barriers, where we hear from the builders, makers, and optimizers in the MENA region.
Thanks for having me.
The reason you should tune in to this episode today is because Sven is one of the key engineering minds behind some of MENA's region's biggest tech scale-ups. He's spent the last decade here in Dubai. He's led teams at Dubizzle. He's helped drive Careem's growth on the way to their 3.1 billion acquisition by Uber, and now is the current CTO of Talabat, where he played a pivotal role in taking the company public. Sven brings a rare perspective combining European engineering discipline with fast, complex reality of building in the Middle East. He's scaled teams, he's rebuilt platforms, and he's navigated rapid growth and hired some of the top talent across the globe into the region. If you're a founder or investor or emerging tech leader, this episode is packed with hard-won lessons on scaling, hiring, leading through chaos, and what it really takes to build in one of the most fastest-moving tech markets. So on that, what does it take to lead engineering from startup chaos to IPO in the Middle East? Sven obviously knows, and our first question for him today is, what moment in your journey really changed the definition of leadership forever?
It's a good question on what changed my leadership definition. I think it's early in my career, working at a startup in Spain. Somebody came into the company and he gave me a tip, and I didn't understand for a long time while I was still there. And you do your job right when your team works as well when you're not there as when you're there. I was barely 20 something and but then what do I do? But over time, it really gets the essence of saying, well, develop your team. You can do afterwards bigger things, take another role, but get them to a place where they can work on their own, make their own decisions, grow, and actually then become fully independent from you. And then you have actually space and headspace to look at different things. So actually, at the beginning, 20-something-year-old, you wonder, why? But over time, you see, okay, develop a team, make them independent.
So that sort of accountability and empowerment, is there any particular things that you would put in place, or how do you actually, because the reality of actually being able to build that type of culture is quite hard. A lot of businesses get it wrong. Is there any sort of advice or tips in terms of once you actually finally understood it that you maybe built your teams around?
I think it's about how you look at mistakes and how you look at consequences. And I think the most interesting part is that if stuff goes wrong, and it always will, you cannot avoid failure if you're trying hard and push to the limits, then the question is how you look at failures. If failures are honest failures and say, look, we tried, it failed, and then you say, well, what do you learn from it, and move on. If you see that a problem is usually consequence, try to develop, but over time you need the hardest part in leadership, I think, to understand how to react to failure and how to develop that. And I think there you have freedom constraints to say, here's what I want to achieve, how to get there, give them a bit of constraints and where the boundaries are, what to stay in, and then observe, check, help, and give them guidance.
I mean, I think that whole ethos around, failing fast and learning from it is the right mindset, because they're the kind of the war stories that you're going to pick up on early on and hopefully bring into your later career as well. Was there a moment that you kind of realized that you were ready to sort of lead engineering teams at scale, or did you naturally fall into it? How did that happen for you?
I think it's a bit be at the right time, right place. I had my fair share of failures and some successes, and at some point you learn from those. I also believe if you look how we approach today product development, we said, well, fail fast, experiment. We don't do the same with organizations. We usually said, oh, here's how we work, and then you do bit by bit. If you scale, you do the similar, try to scale it up. But what if you approach the same experiment, fail, see if it works. If it works, you continue. If not, discard, do something else. And then if you do this consistently, you can evolve organizations over time. And then I think it's just part of it is luck. Luck is a valid factor to be right time, right place. And part of it is have consistently maybe do the right thing or have some successes, whereas then people see, okay, maybe you're right to take a bigger role.
I mean, I definitely like that. Doing the right thing and doing it consistently. Some people might see that as the easiest thing, but it's actually one of the hardest things, I think, as well, over a sustained period of time.
I guess also what really important again is how you react to failure. I mean, one of a strong belief I have is no matter how good you are, the percentage of right decision, wrong decision is fairly constant. So at some point you will fail. What do you do with it? How you react to it? How you evolve from it? That's what counts maybe more than all successes.
Give us an example of that then, like a first leadership win for you versus a first leadership failure, and how did each shape you?
Let's start with the failure. Still living in Spain, doing elections around the world in a company, doing online voting. There was a fairly big project on a short time frame, and the team grew massively. And I think I was used to smaller, up to 30, 40 people. And at some point, we were 100 people owning this project. And at some point, I literally knew I was running it against the wall. I went to my boss and look, I can't do this. It's too big. I need somebody else who knows how to do it. And then he gave me a different role in the project, work with somebody else who actually had more experience with bigger groups. And I think admitting that this will not work. And the industry had very little tolerance for failure. I say, you can try to make it work and fail, or you can just say, well, I can do it. So let's find a way how to work around it. I can help. And then evolve from there. That was a failure. But actually, I also learned my limits at the time because, again, young in my 20s, where you think you're invincible, you can do everything, and then you really get shown what limits are.
And a leadership win then, was there something that then became like your blueprint in terms of how you do things today?
I mean, that's how we split things down, how we divide stuff. A leadership win, a very interesting one, was here in Dubai, working with a small startup, part of the Dubizzle shed. And I think at one point we had to deliver something. We had a plan, but the plan didn't work. And then we get the whole team together, not the usual where we split into different roles, but okay, if we get everybody together and look at how we approach this, and then actually, I think our deliverable was 6. Thinking back, I think we planned to spend 4 to 5 months on it, and we did it in 6 weeks. Just by the way we discussed it, split work, and was pretty amazing. That gave my blueprint of, if everyone understands the business they're in, the rules of the game, what really matters, and can look into how we split stuff, how to make decisions, that actually has more impact than having specific roles which only focus on one thing.
And what would you say are the 3 core values for you then that you lead with today?
Own what you do, no excuses. Like, don't be a victim of circumstance, just shape the circumstances around you. I think be humble, admit your shortcomings, and actually show others that it's okay to say, I don't know what to do, as long as you follow it up by, but I will find out.
Yeah.
And I think help others, or let's say strong convictions loosely held, sort of loosely held.
Yeah.
I think I try to change my mind if somebody has really good arguments.
Yeah. And obviously you've been here a decade or so now. You've been at some obviously top credible companies. Like, how have you seen the tech landscape evolving in the Middle East then? And do you get more and more, a question on that as well, follow up, do you get more and more in the last, let's say, 2 years, more than ever, people from out of the region asking you what it's like here in the Middle East, more so than you did maybe 5 years ago or plus?
I think the Middle Eastern tech landscape becomes more public to the world. 2 reasons. One is we have a lot of people coming here, but also I think the startups from here become more visible outside of the region. For a long time it was in the region for the region. Nowadays, with more startups coming up here, it is built in the region for the world. I think it's a new model of Dubai.
And then how do you see that landscape evolving even further then across the Middle East?
I mean, if I look back, first contact with the Middle East was 2011, having consultancy role, coming to the region over summer, working with some government agencies. And I think there was a lot of contracting. There was a lot of companies having an idea and finding a contractor to build it for them. Nowadays, it's changed a lot to, well, what IP do we want to have? What do we want to build and how it evolves? That it moved from build for my needs to, can I build products here at scale all over? So I think it's a big change, an important change. You see that there are startup competitions in the Middle East growing more and more. Early investment funding is growing. So I think the region sees, or the investor sees a potential in the region that it can grow over time. Population is very young compared to Europe and the US. So I believe if you want to try new, the appetite for adoption, for experimentation here is way higher than in other parts of the world.
What would you say then are maybe some of the common challenges that you see from a technology perspective in terms of why businesses aren't able to scale and how they should maybe lay the foundations to get it right?
Good question. I think there's still getting talent here was hard for a long time. It's getting better, but it still is not as easy. And I believe if you make comparison to Silicon Valley, you have big companies which are around there, but they're always founded around big universities like Stanford, Berkeley, UCLA. There's like a huge provision of young talent, ideas, startup founders coming out of those institutions. Here in the Middle East, for a long time, when people moved here, then when kids are growing older, they left the region and go somewhere else to study. I see it slowly changing. I see that more universities have campus here. The more young people stay in the region to study. And I think that will help that actually you find the talent over time. You don't have to always import, but people who grew up understand the region, understand society here, and then actually can have ideas. Well, here's what we need.
I mean, I myself are seeing more and more top talent that left the region a long time ago to go and work for some of these top technology businesses in the US or Europe, and now are coming back, looking to come back and bring that value and skills to support the wider good as well, which is positive to see. What's your view then on integration and outsourcing versus building local IP?
I mean, outsourcing is still a thing that's heavily done here. You have many providers which call up most companies like, oh, well, we have talent for you, we can build stuff for you. But I think more and more companies focusing on, well, do it themselves. And I think an important distinction is if you know what you want to do, if you can specify it, you can outsource it. But if you build innovative products, then more often than not, you are not able to specify it. You need to build a small part, run an experiment, see how a target audience behaves, understand if it meets the customer's needs, and then actually iterate from there. And if you want to specify iteration, it's either change request, very expensive, or it becomes unsustainable in terms of very slow. I tried that. At a time we tried to grow up quickly. It was hard to hire, and we said let's use outsourcing as well to augment the team.
Because you must have had good and bad experiences, right?
I think for things we could specify, like a design system where we got help, it worked very well. And we didn't know what to do. When we said, we have a hunch what to build, but not a real plan, and said, okay, build one part, then iterate, measure, iterate. Outsourcing companies are very bad at this. So there we tried, and at some point said, you know what, let's build a team internally, bring it in-house. And actually we have nowadays with way better results, but you don't know until you try.
And how do you explain that to new founders? Because a lot of the founders here, especially in the early stages, they outsource, right? But they're not getting that advice in terms of what that means later on down the line for them as a business and the cost versus the efficiency, output,
Mhm.
whatever it might be, in hiring locally?
Yeah. I think there are a couple of models. One is team augmentation, where you say you work with a team where you don't specify that helps, or nearshoring, or where it's called build to own, where you don't hire a team, a company hires a team for you, but they work only on yours, like an internal team. That can work quite well if you start up and then grow over time, because building your own team at the beginning is quite hard. Like for a new founder does things himself, and then after that, well, how do I hire my first engineer, designer, product manager? What do you need in the beginning? That it's easier to get external help to say, how do I scale up? What do I need? Or getting some advice from people who've done it before.
Yeah. And have you seen any particular sort of new trends that's starting to shape the ecosystem as well?
In which sense?
From a technology perspective, from obviously you spoke about in like outsourcing versus bringing everything in house and locally, but any new trends maybe in the last few years that are now really starting to shape the future of the sort of technology ecosystem here?
I think in the past it was, if you attract the right talent and get loads of people, you can build faster. AI tooling obviously helped. So what you see is that more and more groups or small companies with a small team get quicker to $1 billion valuation. So it's no longer you need to have a big organization to get to high valuation, but you can, with a team of, let's say, 10 to 20, 30 people, also reach a similar, the unicorn status, which go back 5 years, it was unthinkable. And nowadays we have seen it a couple of times. So I think we will see more solopreneurs, very small teams, starting bigger and bigger ideas, which then can scale. It becomes very interesting as space. And then it's also like, I wonder if there's a saturation. In the end, as a individual, how many tools do you need? How many can you use? So there's the space getting crowded over time. So I will think we will see more smaller startups, but then at some point it distills into who can survive in the long run.
And how do you see the wider Middle East as well influencing Dubai?
I do think, as the region is very young, there's a lot of trends of what older generations, including, let's say, myself, I'm in my 40s, but if the majority is under 30, there will be new things that will be used, experimented with, which are requiring new products or giving us new ideas how to use technology. And I think there's, the use will drive more influence now, especially the region, as it's very young, has a lot of potential to show us how to use it better.
And if we sort of think about as well, you mentioned talent quite a bit. Do you think that's changed now in the essence of attracting better talent to the region? And why do you think that is? Is that just generally because it's a growing ecosystem? What have been some of the key drivers, probably more in the last couple of years, that's driving that?
I do believe that the Middle East has become more attractive for talent. Think back 10, 15 years, everybody wanted to go to Silicon Valley, then it evolves over time. Dubai a couple years back had maybe 5, 6 big companies which were interesting. Nowadays it sways more after some of those companies had people graduating, let's call it graduating into their own startups. Like think of the middle as a PayPal mafia, when we have similar here in the region that whenever a company got acquired, then there's more people with more funding, start their own ideas, and actually then there's more and more companies. And then if you move to the region, you think about, well, do I come here for a year or two, or could I stay longer? Do I have more places to go after the company I join? So a broader ecosystem attracts over time more talent and better talent, and then great talent attracts more great talent. So I think we will see that more and more people will come into the region, and we'll see an interesting development.
And you also touched on it earlier, and we've spoken about it before, but building more local IP, the more startups will grow over time as well.
Yes, I think that is a big driver in the region's growth. As we've seen, Dubizzle was founded by two young students. Then we had Careem, which was founded also early on. Talabat founded by a couple of students. So you see that more young people founding startups over time, and then most of those companies have huge exits. I think it will motivate more young people to say, well, if they could do it, we could do it. And I think it's a great motivator or a great driver to see the ecosystem evolve.
And do you think as a region comparable to others, maybe in Europe, because I know you spent significant time there as well from, but like we have a quicker adoption of industry trends, technology, quicker than other regions. But then do you also think that drops the focus? And then obviously also the investment and the government support here as well?
I believe the government here is more supportive in new ideas and startups. We've seen many trends over the last 10 years where the government was supportive, had their own investments. I think it helps adoption experimentation. It reduces risks for new founders. And over time, the wider industry shows what sticks and what not. We had the crypto boom for some time. It went up quite a bit. I think now it's less, it's still there. But adoption might still be out. Let's see what the future brings. Now we have AI. I think AI is a more fundamental change and it will stay around for longer. So, but also it needs now certain investment. The government is putting a lot of it, investors are putting a lot of it, and we see more and more startups growing, but then we need to see what sticks in the end. But then I believe there's afterwards new waves coming and we see that investments will be there and it helps.
You said there was a particular talk, Crossing the River by Feeling the Stones, and how that made you think about like the evolution of the tech ecosystem. So explain to the audience what that means.
Oh, yes. It's talk by Simon Wardley. It talks about how everything goes in our industry from, let's say, genesis to custom build to products to utility. Think about the first light bulbs, electric generators, or which became from a handmade light bulb to you buy at a store for near nothing. From the first computers which are building to crack codes to machines for filling a building, to small PCs, to now at Amazon you click yourself a computer. And I think over time everything which is useful becomes more commoditized, which increases adoption and use. And I think you just need to find out when you want to build stuff, what is really unique in the Genesis area where say it's a unique selling point or only you have it. What is a product that you can build and sell? What is becoming more commodity? And then where you are in between. So if you have an idea, you find out what do you want to build, what can you contract, what can you buy off the shelf, and what is just there. And actually, if you think about value chain and how to find out what you want to build versus how it evolves and how it fits, it's a way to focus on the most value you can create versus of what you can just get somewhere for cheap.
Amazing. I love that. If we think about Talabat, Careem, Dubizzle, they've all gone through significant amounts of growth during their time. How do you scale the engineering team? Like, what advice do you have there to other kind of executives? What are the things to look out for?
I think one of the learnings I have from those organizations is change is constant. Create an organization that can adapt to change at any moment. I think in Dubizzle we changed our organization structure multiple times. We had platform migrations. At Careem we changed organization multiple times. At Talabat, our org structure and product and tech, I think we did 4 changes over the years. How we work with the business side changed multiple times. And I think if you're able to adapt to all those, and like, as I said before, see an organization not as a construct, but more as a ground for experimentation and figure out what works best to achieve your goals. And as your goals and strategy changes, the way you work and collaborate evolves as well. As long as I said, what worked for me yesterday at 150, 200 people, does it still work tomorrow when I have 300, 400, 500? Usually not. So as long as you're able to evolve this consistently to make sure that what you have right now and the way you work helps to achieve your goals, then you can make everything happen.
Give us a war story moment then. Technical chaos meets leadership challenges.
I think at some point we realized that as we scaled our organization, we grew the business, that at some point we would be stuck. And we knew that if we really want to make a change, a fundamental change, it might take us a year or two. And convincing everybody that we should start doing this actually took a while, because if it works right now, why change? Why want to change that takes you a year, while we could do maybe, what if we wait 6 months and see? But actually, if you convince everybody, we try to keep our momentum up while building, then we would not have a significant slowdown, but could still evolve and actually don't have to step on the brakes for 2 quarters in a year, 18 months. Like those big changes are defining, have long discussions, but in the end it worked out. I think we're still working on it.
What are they then? Are they structure? Are they processes? What are those kind of slight pivots that you need?
I think at some point we try to fix a problem over time. We tried it within the team. And at some point we said, you know what, have 2 teams in parallel. One keeps alive what we have and one starts from scratch. Usually we don't want to start over from scratch, but sometimes you have to. And the interesting part is when we preach of saying, evolve systems, don't start from scratch. That's usually not a good reason for it. And then you have to come around and say, well, actually, I think we were wrong. We have to start from scratch because it didn't work. We tried now for so long. And then you wonder about your own credibility of saying, after you tell people to go do one thing and then you tell them, well, maybe we should change it completely, then the reasoning why you have a change of mind takes a while.
Because if I'm a founder, let's say, listening to this and I'm about to go through some form of hypergrowth, keen to understand and listening to you, what are the things that maybe you got wrong that you wouldn't want other founders or executives to get wrong?
I don't think there's a definition of wrong. I mean, manager in Talabat, our systems were able or apt for what we had at the time. But as we grew, you see the friction or the cost of change grows. And then we had people joining said, oh, the old stuff we had. And then if you have to convey the conviction of saying, well, if you're a small startup, not making a single order, what we build now, after you do millions of orders, might not be needed because you don't know if you survive. Like you don't know if you have a market big enough when you start off. And the systems built at the time were good enough for what was needed. And actually, as a startup, you want speed and iteration and prove product market fit and actually try to make your mark more than everything else. Scale is a problem for later. Sometimes I like to say it's a tomorrow's Sven problem to figure it out, but figure out what you need at the time, survive the day, make progress, and then when you really have scale as a problem, it's a good problem to have. Like many people think about, oh, let's solve for scale at the beginning, but will you really need it? Nobody knows.
Yeah. What would you say were the hardest sort of engineering trade-offs then during peak scale?
I think at some point we had to rebuild our apps where we said it didn't scale or it was very costly to scale. And at some point it were long discussions when you need to think about how much of an investment it is. Because we like to say time is money, but actually if you work at a place and you pay people salary, time really is money. And to really change fundamentals of certain systems proved more expensive than I thought it would. Like we usually say, well, it's
Was that an example of that, like moving to Flutter as a mobile app? Or
yeah, we did that.
Yeah.
I thought we could do it in a year. It took us a year and a half. Still worse that it enables a lot of things, but
because I saw this in the UK, by the way. I actually joined recruitment in the mobile during the mobile boom.
Yeah.
So at the time, it was Objective-C, and then moved on the iOS side, and obviously moving to Swift and Kotlin, etc. And then I saw a lot of these businesses in the UK start to switch to React Native and Flutter. But now I'm actually seeing a lot of those, a big chunk of those businesses start to move back to native mobile.
I heard a bit about it, but I have not seen why. Like we looked at it, and I think when I first spoke to our mobile teams about it, they were not a fan at all of it. They asked, why would I want to do that? Nowadays, they wouldn't want to move back.
Oh, really?
Yes. It'd make a big difference for us in terms of speed. You only build things once. What I found interesting is, but the second order metric, success factors, for example, tracking is always the same. You don't have a different tracking between iOS and Android. You can trust your metrics way more. Speed of iteration helped. I think it was a risk, but it was worth taking it, and it paid off for us. I don't like it doesn't pay off for everybody automatically, but for us it worked out well.
Yeah. How do you structure teams then to move fast without breaking everything?
Going back to autonomy and guardrails, I think what we aim for over time is not focusing on very, very small teams, but say if you take bigger groups, which are a bit more flexible, think a bit teams, domains, tribes in size. If you have a team and give a team a name, actually the hard part is if you give it a name, they would invent objectives to fulfill with their name, their mission. If you give it a domain, let's say within the domain you can organize as you please, then they look more about the objectives. The domain would rearrange themselves where they then said, well, if a certain team doesn't have much work for this quarter because there's no objective for it or it's good enough, but a different site has a lot more, they would naturally gravitate towards a bigger problem and solve that. So not focusing too much on team and team name, but bigger structures, say 20 to 40 people, and gives them the autonomy to say, you arrange as you see fit to achieve your objectives. That helps a lot.
If we think about the IPO as a CTO, and relatively rare in the region, and then behind that curtain at Talabat, how do you maintain product velocity, like when maybe due diligence is breathing down your neck, and then maybe managing that pressure between tech debt, product delivery, scrutiny? Maybe it wasn't in your case, but like,
I think like if you have a private company moving to an IPO, then you have more first-time scrutiny. As we were part of a public group, we already had a number of audits every year. So on tech side, it was less problematic because we already had those audits. I think for our CFO and our CEO, it was a lot more audits, a lot more insights into business models. I think for them, it's a lot harder than it was on tech side.
Yeah. What would you say then CTOs maybe underestimate about the IPO journey?
I think the IPO journey is very focused on your CEO, CFO, and less about tech. Tech has to do some audits and some due diligence, but after that, just think about how you can help. I think it's a very much. Think of a bit of an IPO is a knighthood for a CEO, CFO, and I think it's more like how you can help them. Like finding investors, raising money is a lot of stress. Is there anything we can help? Then let's do that.
You join as a CTO as a new company. This is me talking theoretically, based on your experience now. Your first 90 days in the job, how would you structure a sort of high-performing engineering organization today?
I would think about getting them as close as a business as I can. In the past, you would say you have your business team, product in the middle, tech interfacing with business. I would say, get engineers talk to customers and really, really understand the game of the business, understand the numbers and metrics. It helps them to be better at decision-making, trade-offs, what to focus on. There's this discussion about what's a 10x engineer. I think 10x engineers are the ones who are good at what they do, but also know what they don't have to do. So there's a lot of things you could do in a nice way, but also say sometimes you don't have to, and that is what really saves time. So being able to get more things done, but knowing what to leave out helps a lot.
And what would you say is your hiring bar then for hiring senior engineers and engineer leaders, and how do you test for it?
I like to think, there's technical test competencies, but more, I look in what good means for them and how they handle failure. I think that those two are the most critical questions as
So what good looks like and how they handle failure. Yeah.
What's your ambition? What do you want to achieve? If you have a senior engineer and for them they just say, I implement a feature as I was told, I don't think it's very ambitious nor very good. I think it's more like, I looked into a problem, I thought of what it means and had a couple of solutions, discussed them with various stakeholders, and then find out what the best way forward, what's the most efficient way for us to get the results.
Yeah.
Like those things. A couple of years back, we had a team which was very interesting. They were mid-quarter, came back and said, we have a problem. We don't make our objectives and we don't know what to do because we can follow a plan and fail, or we could change the plan and figure out, but we don't know what to do, but we can just say we will change the plan. I found a very interesting discussion because they're saying, well, we committed to a plan, but the plan doesn't work. What do you do? And I change the plan, obviously, but that they get to that decision on their own was actually a good discussion with them. And it was nice to see, to say, well, they want to change the plan and just give them, well, it's your freedom, you can do that.
I like that. Founders in the region, I find, don't know what a CTO does versus a VP engineering and a head of engineering. They don't know. I've spent long enough here now to obviously try and coach them. I want you to break it down in simple terms. What does a CTO do versus a VP of engineering versus a head of engineering for founders that are looking to make that decision of hiring their first engineering leader?
Let's look at head of engineering can be part of a function of a bigger organization, or can be a mix of, if the organization is big enough that you have a CTO or a VP, then the head of engineering can be both roles. If you're big enough that you have split functions, VP engineering is make stuff work, internal looking, set up teams, organize the organization, and actually look for results. CTO can be more outside looking, interact with customers, think what the big problems are, what's next, giving a bit more guidance for the organization. However, I still believe good execution is fundamental. And even if you have a VP, then CTO should still look at it and help guide that. Give people or teams coverage for trade-offs, for hard discussions. I do think leadership's role is also to take risks and not delegate those risks to middle management. So I think everything which goes wrong bubbles up. So I think it's also, you have to be able to say you give teams autonomy, and then if it fails, you have to stand up for it.
Yeah. What are the things that you say you've done well when it comes to like retention of the top 5% talent in the region?
Try to find interesting challenges for them and enable them to grow. Like, I think regardless how good you are, you've always find areas to grow and give them the right support. I think that usually helps. And then really, really good people want to work on interesting problems. And if they're in the same team, same area for a long time, they might get bored. I believe if you have a spot to find different place for them within your company, and allows them to move from one area to the other over time. They will stay longer as new environment, new challenge, new problems to solve is more interesting. They stay in one spot over years.
What about how do you sort of coach underperformers versus elevate those high performers then?
Elevate high performers is easier. Just give them very interesting problems and help them to find areas, or actually also challenge them with new thoughts. On coaching underperformers, it depends if it's skill. Skill can be taught. Attitude is a bigger problem, which is more problematic to teach. But even then you can say if it's motivation, maybe a different area helps them. If it's personal circumstance, gives them time and space and understanding. And if it's just, maybe also sometimes it's just the wrong environment. So there are people which are work very, very well in small startups, 35 people teams. Others want to have a bigger organization with more structure. So you need to find who's good for what. And then sometimes also if people really don't fit your environment, you can have an open conversation with them like, hey, maybe you like a different size of organization better. And if you have contacts, you can help them to find a different role somewhere else.
Yeah. And is there one thing that you'd say you implemented that 10x sort of the engineering velocity?
I think treat the organization as an experiment. Similar as your product. Try different things. If it doesn't work, change it. Shorter cycles, treat quality as an enabler, not as a quality or speed, but speed enables. Again, on my theory of saying the number of times you're right or wrong is constant. If you have a quarter and you do 2-week sprints and you have 6 choices or 6 times to correct. If you do 1-week sprints and you have 12. If you cut the iterations even shorter, then you have more opportunities to correct. So the shorter the cycle time, the more opportunities you have your right path. And I think our industry likes the 2-week cycles. If I could, I would like to shorten this to ship something to a customer every single day, see how they react, iterate after. But there's a bit of, it's hard to achieve. Like this ship daily or ship multiple times a day can be tough and feels stressful.
And is there a tech stack that you probably bet on over the next 2 years? I was going to say 5, but I think that's too long in the grand scheme of things with AI.
I wouldn't say there's a stack. It's just have a bit of constants, what you find talent in the industry. I think over my career, I've changed the stack so many times. The only thing I learned is change is constant. Again, I think we started with .NET. We still have it. We do more in Golang. Mobile stays around. AI will be interesting as it's a very new field. I do believe over time you find areas where you maybe get a clear winner or models become more commodity. So a couple years back, ranking was built a model, is still an internal model. I believe if you wait a couple years, you could use an LLM, which you pass enough parameters of past orders, tastes, it will be as good as an internal ranking. It might be even cheaper to build or to run. So I think that will be an interesting space to watch or experiment.
And do you have any advice as a CTO in terms of how to align with product, commercial, and CEO priorities?
Look at the ambitions of your company. Ambitions, bet, commitments. See where you think you might have a blocker on your current stack. What are the risks? How to address that early on? Like, don't have any surprise that you come in the middle of the year and said, oh, we can't do that because of. Try to find what are the limits you have and how you can enable the rest. Get close to the business, understand what you drive. Look that tech doesn't become a cost center, but actually an enabler and drives value over time. That are the biggest things for CTOs.
And I want to move over to some quick fire questions around AI, because we haven't spoken about that yet. How are you using AI internally? Like, do you have real use cases versus the hype that we hear today?
recommendations, content. It's live. We use it actively. I believe voice will be a thing in the future. We're still working on how that could fit in. I believe, go back to WhatsApp. WhatsApp was text messaging, but it really grew over time, and I think it grew 4x when voice was enabled. AI models are still early on. They get a lot better, like we have seen some demos 2-3 weeks back, where voice generation is becoming quite good. I still think it lacks a little bit of context, but I think in the next 6 months we will see more and more interactions. And I mean, if you follow the news where tech news sites said, oh, well, more companies are working on the replacement of the phone, the question is then, give that 5-10 years, how that evolves, how interaction of voice assistant would change everyday life. That's an interesting thing to look out for.
What's your take then on the risks of LLMs inside consumer platforms?
I think one is hallucinations. Like an LLM can give you the impression what it gives you as an answer is true, while it could be wrong. It's just the way it presents the answer is so convincing, and the argument can be so convincing that you might be misled. So I think there's a lot to do on the safety research in the builders of those LLMs, and also in educating consumers about being critical of the answers. You still have to think on your own. Like it facilitates research, but you still then afterwards how you validate the answer is true.
Two-part question. How do you approach security then in a world of accelerated AI deployment? And does innovation suffer when security then gets too heavy?
Let's first look at security in the age of AI. I think data privacy is a big worry. Then how do you enable people to use those platforms while not exposing information? And I think it's a risk for every company of saying how you allow a use of, let's say, Gemini, ChatGPT, Claude, without getting your data into the models trained. And I think one, enterprise contracts help, but they're very expensive. Then we say they guarantee that the data is isolated, and the other part is education, because tools are super powerful. They allow you to make work faster, make it better, but you have the risk of data exposure. And then educating of saying what you can share, what not, how to ask questions that you avoid data exposure helps a lot. And then also give people in your company tools to share data in a secure way. For example, we have a contract with Google and Gemini usage where I say, well, that integrates and actually they guarantee the privacy, then they can use more data without the risk of exposure, while if you use a different platform, you would need to ask generic questions without providing details. So it's a lot. And how does security
Innovation suffer, when security gets too heavy?
Yeah, I think it's a trade-off. Like it's always a trade-off in terms of what can you expose and whatnot. And sometimes you have to say, well, I'm not willing to take a risk, because again, it's risk versus reward. If tool of the week, because the space moves so fast, is not easy to manage or could not explain how they handle security or data privacy, or if they maybe don't have it under focus. Like if it's a pure consumer focused platform which doesn't have guarantees of data privacy or model training or data retention, then maybe you need to pass on a tool over time.
Anything that I didn't ask you around AI that you feel is important for our listeners?
I think it's an interesting space to watch. A quote I got from an interview a while back, I don't remember the source. It was, everybody knows it will profoundly have an impact on society like the internet in the 90s. The thing is just people don't know yet exactly how it looks like and how to build a sustainable business around it. Because in the end, there's so many startups right now which try to build something, but we still need another year, 2, or maybe even 5 to see what's really truly valuable, what's possible, and what are the frontiers where how far we can reach before we get stuck. That would be an interesting journey.
Mm. So if we just switch gears to innovation and food tech before we finish up with our quickfire round, where do you feel the real innovation is happening in the food delivery space now?
I think there's a lot more coming on last mile. There is AI not only enables consumer tech and apps, it also enables robotics a lot. I think we see interesting developments at a sister company of ours in Korea. I think around the world there's more to see. And in the Middle East, summer is coming. Summer gets really hot during midday. So I think robotics could be an interesting space. Give it a couple of years. Like it's not, this year in summer. I think more, we will see more proof of concepts over time and then
More drones?
Maybe. Air traffic has more reliant on regulation, while what's on the ground is easier to manage.
Mm-hmm. How would you say Talabat localized may be better than others?
I think born in the region, we have a lot of exposure to local culture, and we look into what the region needs, what the local market needs, and with a strong presence in all markets we operate, helps us a lot to adapt to local needs.
Mm-hmm. Quick fire round then.
Okay.
First thing that comes to mind. What's still broken in the MENA engineering ecosystem?
It's still broken. I don't think anything is really broken. I think it needs time to develop, but I think it's a very interesting young ecosystem that has a bright future ahead.
What do you think Silicon Valley just don't understand about the MENA tech ecosystem?
I guess the use of our target audience. Silicon Valley had a lot about social media. We have that too, but actually we don't have the big social media platforms here. I also believe it's a good thing, but then think more about what people directly need.
Hardest decision you've ever made as a CTO?
When to part with somebody who I was close with.
Super hard. One book that every engineering leader should read?
I have 3. I think Jocko Willink, Extreme Ownership, Stephen Bungay, The Art of Action, and Amp It Up by Frank Schlossman. And in that order. I think it's quite impactful.
Favorite failure?
The one I mentioned before, when I had a super big org and I wasn't ready for it.
What's the one thing you've changed your mind on about leadership?
I think freedom constraints, also from the Art of Action book, how to guide people to make up their own mind. Explain them what the outcome is, not what you want them to do, and then see what happens. It's a bit of magic.
What trend is overhyped and what's underhyped?
AI and AI. I think it's overhyped right now, but also underhyped if you think in the long run. Like we're still yet to see what's possible.
Yeah. Hire fast or slow?
Slow.
Thinking about building an engineering hub? Dubai, Cairo, or Riyadh?
I've never been to Riyadh. I can't judge. I like Dubai and talent attracts. I like Cairo for the energy and vibe, like the hunger of the people there is impressive. I always like to go back.
Nice. Biggest myth about the role of a CTO?
Biggest myth is you can do whatever you want, but actually it's more how you enable a company to grow and scale. And it's hard.
One product decision you'd undo if you could?
I don't know. I think right now I don't have one. I think it's fairly decent.
And one thing founders always misunderstand about technology.
They think it's easy and fast, and I've read somewhere it's easy, so why are you telling me it's hard?
Last two questions are important because I think it's both for inside and outside of the market. If you could write a 3-rule playbook for CTOs building in emerging markets, what would it be? 3 rules.
3 rules. That's super hard. Find the right people, get them close to customers and business, and see how you enable them.
And then lastly, what legacy do you want to leave as a builder in the region?
I think I would like to help people to grow and become successful. Like, if I once stop working, leave the region, and people say, hey, Thomas Sven, like, help me to grow, would be a nice thing to be remembered by.
Love that. Sven, thank you for joining Breaking Down Barriers. It's been a pleasure.
Okay. Thanks for having me.